Yep.
Oh, why am I doing that?
Tweets going out.
Look at this! Look at this sucker.
What am I looking at?
Epic Day, double IPA. Colorado.
10%? Nice.
Yeah, Buena Vista, Colorado. Would it be inappropriate to say I have a mudslide of news today?
You're a terrible human being.
Yes, I am. Glad we caught that on the live broadcast, though.
Alrighty.
Maybe I should subscribe to PHP Ugly. Switching out.
Okay, ladies.
Hey.
Hey, we have a new subscriber to the channel, John Congdon. John, thank you for listening.
It's good having you.
You ever watch the streamers and they call out their subscriber?
Whoa.
Oh, yeah. I'm literally basing a cryptocurrency on that.
All right.
All right. Sorry. I got lost in
the tweet that I wanted.
Hi, Ted. What?
Are we ready?
No, I was talking to the listener that's out there already.
That's no listeners. It's you and I.
Oh, who's Ted Nugent?
Oh, yeah, no, he is a listener.
Hey,
See?
Ted, you're back.
It make me feel like I'm crazy. I thought one of you was using some alias.
No. I don't even know how to use aliases. All right.
You are an alias.
See? Ted gets a little inside for tuning in early. Gets to see what an indecent human being Thomas is. Congratulations.
And by the way, you don't have to type "hey there" into the chat when you can just say it out loud.
Yeah, but see, when other people log on, they see that there's some conversation going on.
It can be all one-sided. Still conversation.
We really start the show.
Give us your number.
Okay. The year is 1969. In a little town called Helsinki, Finland, a young Linus Torvalds is born. Linus would grow up to change the world. He would later attend, where did he attend? Helsinki, the University of Helsinki, where he would start to do work on a computer science degree, get that education. Now, this is back in 1988 to 1996. So the internet was nowhere near what it is. However, Linus ends up purchasing an Intel 8386, a IBM PC clone. He did this so that he could run a copy of Minix, which was the operating system that they were learning on. Linus would later take Minix and write his own operating system that would change and revolutionize the world, called Linux. He first released Linux to the public in the year 1991. This is episode 91 of PHP Ugly. Coincidence? I think not.
These things are getting longer and longer.
So
I'm going to have a whole show like that.
Obviously, you missed my retweet from earlier.
If it involves mudslides, I will not entertain that conversation with you, Thomas.
So someone was notifying the person who runs lkml.org, the Linux kernel mailing list.
Oh, I did see that.
Linus, Linus uses that to do all of his outbound communication to the community. Mm-hmm. And it turns out that the guy who runs it is running it on a computer in his house, and he's on vacation, and a power outage knocked it out, and he can't get it back on until he gets home from vacation. Some 1991 level problems right there.
That's hilarious.
When I read that, it reminded me of back in the day, like when high-speed internet first became available. You had all the ports open to your house, including things like port 443. And again, speaking of Linux, I was one of the early adopters of Linux. And so I had a tower that was a server running Linux. And I made a blog post. I was doing my own personal blog and stuff. And I'm sitting there typing one night on my computer. It's like 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And all of a sudden I hear, tick, 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 tick. I look over at my server and it's just going haywire. And it runs like that all night long till around 7 to 8 o'clock in the morning. I realized the server is like down. It's not serving up my blog anymore. So I'm like, what the hell? And I turn it off and I turn it back on. And about 5-10 minutes later, the same thing starts to happen. And I'm like, what is going on? And so I start checking out the logs, and I got, so it was before Reddit, it was before Dig. There was another site out there.
Slashdot.
No, it wasn't Slashdotted. It was, I can't remember what it is now. It just escaped me. Anyways, I got posted on one of these boards, and the traffic was insane. And it went like that for like 2 or 3 days. I eventually just turned off my server. I'm like, this has got to stop.
No, nothing of caching at that time, right?
No, I know nothing of nothing. I mean, I don't even remember what I had written the little blog in. It was probably just HTML at the time. It was insane.
Yeah, I was in charge of my network security at my first job in '99, and it was still very much the case then that stuff was just open on the internet for no good reason.
Right.
And because my job was security, I was learning all of the security tools that I would ever want to learn, and ended up printing things to printers all over the country that were just left open on the internet.
Yeah,
it was always fun connecting to like your neighbors' computers and like seeing all their files and then telling them about it.
And keep in mind, Telnet was the way you jumped from box to box back then too. It was a crazy time. We were kooky.
That's how I still jump from box to box. What are you talking about?
Of course it is. I thought you were using that Windows protocol, NetBase or what it was.
What are you
NetBIOS.
NetBIOS. No, it wasn't NetBIOS.
Oh boy, NetBIOS was fun.
Was that it? Was that the one where you could send alerts to all the computers on the network?
Yeah, and you could open up something called a null connection where you tried to authenticate, but then turn down the option to authenticate. And so you're now registered as a guest on the network. And once you're a guest on the network, you can start enumerating all the computers that are there and digging for passwords.
Wasn't there a version of Windows where it would ask you for a password that you could just cancel out of?
No, that was Mac about a month and a half ago. Was that what you're talking about?
Oh man, brutal! You guys are brutal. You're right, though. I know.
All right, go in the show notes now.
I have a question for you guys. I want to pose a question because I was thinking about this today, and I have an answer, but I want to hear y'all's answers first. Now I'm gonna ask. Let me ask the question first. What in the history of your learning PHP? What really revolutionized or changed the way you code? Now, I'm going to take a few things off the table. A couple of what I think are obvious. Composers off the table. IDEs are off the table. Frameworks are off the table. I'm looking for something that you learned that you were like, man, I wish I had known this, 5 years ago, and I would be such a better developer today. What? It doesn't have to be recent. It could have been something that you learned when you did start. I don't know. Just what what lesson, what pattern, what workflow, what function, what happened that made you say, wow, this is a game changer for me?
Object orientation being the big one.
What was that?
Just object-oriented programming.
Oh,
I mean,
object-oriented. Okay, that's a great one.
I mean, I came up where you had so many files and you had functions everywhere. You're including files everywhere, but it was just functional or just functions that you were calling.
So my question for you, John, did you learn object-oriented programming through PHP?
So yes and no. I knew of objects. I knew, like, I was writing Java and Ada and using those languages in college. But when I got into web programming, and I was in Perl and PHP, so I knew how to use objects, but how to define my own and really use them took me a long time. And
Okay.
learning the different patterns, I'm still on a learning course, constantly learning. That's why I
Always.
love the meetups and conferences and everything else. But learning new patterns and how to write good objects was a game changer.
Yeah. Thomas?
I stopped learning for years and years. I learned enough to carry me through at a pace I was comfortable with, and I went to a meetup and I met two guys who were passionate about learning.
You're so full of it.
You
No
can't,
way.
Really
laugh,
answer, you
you can't laugh
bastard.
until you hear the punchline.
Absolutely. Shout outs to Kalen. No, I met the two of you. Honestly, you guys were passionate and you were presenting stuff I'd never even thought of or heard of before. You encouraged me to start presenting, which brought me down this path of improving myself every day and learning something that I could give to other people. And yeah, absolutely, the meetups totally changed my trajectory.
Yeah, now you make me feel like a jerk for treating you so bad all this time.
That's a great
Yeah.
answer. The continued learning.
It really is.
Well,
I was done.
That's what made me think of this question. Is I realized I was thinking about today of how it seems like every week or two I'm learning something new, and like earth-shattering stuff that once I learn it seems so obvious, but it's like this is dynamite. This is dynamite stuff. And I was thinking, I was like, we have to be in one of the only fields with maybe scientists do this as well, but we have to be in one of the few fields where it's this constant learning. It's just amazing. And I know we have a couple people watching live. If you guys feel like shouting out things for yourselves, feel free. We'll mention it here. I to this day, and I think I've told you this in the past, to this day, I credit Ruby and Rails for my passion in making me a better PHP developer, because I was one of the quintessential learn PHP on my own, basically learn PHP with Dreamweaver. Every bad practice in the book I did, and I did with pride. And, I would have things happening and thought this was great. But I started reading up on things like object-oriented programming. And I'm like, I really want to do this, but I had trained myself certain with PHP, and I couldn't get my head around object-oriented programming in PHP because it made sense, but I couldn't figure out how to implement it or where to implement it or when the best time to implement it. And I always would break down with that and trying to say, okay, I think I can just create a function to do this. I'll just put the code here and I'll put the code there and I'll put the code over here. And it just makes more sense because I had to tweak it a little bit here, tweak it a little bit there. And I couldn't get my mindset on object-oriented programming. And I really felt like I was going to die as a PHP developer. And essentially I did. I'm like, I'm giving up on PHP. I'm moving on. And I took up Ruby and Ruby on Rails specifically because it was supposed to be the next hotness. It was going to be the thing that dethroned PHP. It was designed for the web, or designed with the web in mind, and this and that. And I probably spent a good year to 2 years hardcore Rails programming. And because I didn't know Ruby and I didn't know Rails, I learned object-oriented programming because that's what it was. And it all just made sense because I wasn't fighting the knowledge. I wasn't fighting the learning. And it all made sense, and I put it all together. And it was around year 2, I was still feeling like, well, I could do this faster in PHP. I know how to do this in PHP. How do I do it in Rails? And I was constantly trying to figure out how to do things in Rails that I would do in PHP. When I finally just took a step back and said, okay, why am I doing this? I understand object-oriented programming. I can apply it to PHP now. I get that. I understand that. And I made my transition back to PHP. And ever since then, I have not stopped learning patterns, frameworks, workflows, and Rails, and Ruby on Rails specifically just saved me as a PHP developer. And again, I brought that up because it's interesting to see what's happening in the Ruby and the Rails community.
Because it's dead, isn't it?
In one aspect, it really is mirroring the PHP community, 6, 7, 8 years ago, when people were saying PHP is dead. It's not evolving. It's not doing anything. And there's a lot of talk about that in the Rails community, or the Ruby community. So Rails is a framework built on Ruby. And I hardly ever hear anything about Rails. I mean, there's still a lot of Rails developers out there, and I see job postings for it, but it doesn't have anywhere near the speed that it used to have. And then, yeah, exactly what you said, Thomas. I come across this article. Is Ruby still dead? Or Ruby still, isn't it dead? And I was reading up, and I'm like, no, it's not dead. It's just they're just not doing that much new cool stuff with it. And that's probably one of the problems with these languages and these platforms that get their notoriety for being cutting edge, bleeding edge, that new hottest. When that that shine, that polish wears off on the platform, and they have to go through the grind of supporting stuff 4 years, 5 years, 10 years out. And it's no longer about being the newest, coolest thing. It's about what can we do what can we implement that doesn't break all our legacy code for the past 5 years? And
so I'm glad PHP is not doing. I'm glad PHP is all about breaking legacy code now.
It's just it's interesting to see the mirrors. I still think PHP won out on the web, not because it was a better platform, not because it was superior in any way. It was because it was a default install in every server that was deployed. I mean, if you ever tried to, yeah. Well, Rails was easy. Ruby was easy. Ruby is a natural language almost. I mean, I feel the same way about Python. You don't need to know anything about programming, and you can look at a Python program and understand what it's doing just by reading through it. Rails is the same way. But to deploy a Rails application on the server took some effort, especially in the early days when hosting providers didn't offer it as a platform. That's why people like Heroku, got a head start, because they catered to the Rails community. So that's why PHP stuck in there.
Now, I gave a presentation yesterday, my classic intro to object-oriented programming in PHP with cats.
With cats? Like meow meow cats?
Meow meow cats. It was my first.
Is there any other kind?
It was my first sober presentation.
Oh, that had been weird.
It was. I remember the whole thing.
How'd it go?
It went really well. We had a really good turnout. I told you we had, maybe 4 or 5 people the first meetup, and we had a solid 12 people. Everyone who said they were going to come did come.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and it was a fantastic meetup. I was conscious the whole time. And it was a really good mix of people who had never programmed and were looking into it, people who had programmed but weren't doing it professionally, and people who were programmers for a couple of years, taking over certain tasks at their office or whatever, and a couple of people who had years and years of experience. And that's the kind of mix that you want at a meetup.
Yeah, exactly.
And some strange stuff. There was a guy there who he was there because he'd worked at Verizon for 20 years and realized that every year they lay off 20% of their staff, and that he was probably going to end up in that 20% sooner rather than later.
Oh.
So he was looking for a skill that he could be interested in and apply in the real world. And and then the very classic people like me with questionable hygiene and extensive knowledge.
So Ted Nugent brings up a really good one. He agrees. He talks about moving to object-oriented programming. He brought up another one that had a big impact on me that I didn't even think about. But templating, when he learned the concept of templating and using Twig, where you could just write a template for your output. That was a big one for him. That was
a very awkward transition from Thomas's story, and you went back to another one without
Well, John, I do believe I said if people were willing to offer up this information in chat, that
I just said it was a weird transition.
So
and I don't think all of our listeners.
I was trying to get back to it and bring it back in before we started. I appreciate
it. Just could have been a different transition.
The show to a stop. That was pleasant, and not making it completely obvious. But good work. Good work.
And for the listeners who are watching the stream live, Ted Nugent is the alias of somebody in the Yahoo or in the YouTube chat right now.
I'm pretty sure it's not an alias. I think his name is Ted Nugent. I've spoken with this guy on Twitter before. I'm pretty sure that's his name. But if you want to think there's only one real Ted Nugent in the world, okay.
Apparently that is his real name. That's impressive.
Yeah, I know. I will vouch for the guy.
So. Well, I was giving a lot of examples using cats as sort of prototypical objects in PHP, mammals as traits or interfaces, things like that. Just using, metaphors for everything, like I do. And one of the guys there said, "Hey, you really researched about cats for this presentation, didn't you?" And I said, "I really wish I could say I had, but everything on here was just stuff I already knew about cats." But that was, I believe that was one of the first presentations I gave at SDPHP with you guys.
I don't remember a cat one, but it very well could have been.
So what else going on this week? You guys had a meetup.
We did last night, and we ended up having 2 talks. We now have one of our members doing a lightning talk every month on Vue. He's been doing a project for us, been over a year now, year and a half, and he's grown to love it as his front-end language and just wants to help other people continue down that path. So he did a lightning talk on testing within Vue because it lined up well with the main presentation we had, which was on Cucumber, Gherkin, and Behat.
So I need more information on that because I don't know Cucumber or Gherkin.
For PHP, they're all kind of one and the same, right? Cucumber was, I guess it's the testing language just in general. Was it first written for Ruby? Did he say that
Yeah.
last night?
Yeah.
And then Gherkin
That's
is
where it got its popularity, at least.
yeah. Gherkin is like the natural language specification
The
where you have a
syntax.
scenario. Yeah. You have a scenario and you lay it out given these conditions, and then this happens. You verify information after that. And then Behat is the PHP version of Cucumber. Why they didn't call it Cucumber, I don't know.
Because it's called Behat. Weren't you paying attention last night, John?
I never pay attention.
No, he wasn't.
I don't know if we mentioned it, Thomas, and it was brought to our attention again last night, but the organizer of Peak PHP, we talked about how he used to live in San Diego.
Yes.
Well, where we host our San Diego PHP meetups is actually at the company he works for currently.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, so we appreciate them taking care of us.
Yeah, when you told us about him previously, we assumed that he used to work there and then moved to Colorado and didn't anymore. And we found out last night that he is still actively employed, working remote.
Yeah, he pulled off the exact same thing I did, which was manage to work remotely, but in the same city, and then to say, oh, by the way, I'm moving to Colorado Springs, and moving to Colorado Springs with the same pay. It's a nice deal.
Yeah, I don't get that whole pay by where you live thing. That's crazy.
It came up at my meetup. Actually, one of the guys said, "Well, what is the market like for PHP right now? If I learn PHP, is there a good market for it?" And one of the more experienced attendees said, "Oh yeah, there's guys who've been doing this long enough and know enough about it that they're making upwards of $100,000 a year." And I just sort of looked around the room and went, "Yeah, there are some guys like that. Let's move on."
So that's interesting. You should say that, John, because obviously we're in a position where we have remote developers working for us, and we base our pay scale evenly across the board. But do you feel like there isn't an argument for saying? Now, I don't know how you would handle it if somebody like Thomas starts working in San Diego, gets a pay scale based on that, and then moves to somewhere like Colorado. But you're saying that there is no argument for somebody in Louisiana or somewhere that has a lower cost of living.
I don't
thoroughly hashed this out in a previous episode.
Yeah, we did, and no, I don't believe that. I think it's absolutely ridiculous if a company is willing to pay whatever. Let's 100 is nice or not. They're willing to pay somebody $100,000 if they live near them. Why would they not pay and they're doing the same exact job, but they live in Louisiana? Why would you not pay them the same amount?
Remote is remote.
I mean, there could be the argument be made that you're remote in San Diego, but if your company's in San Diego and they need you to show up at the office, you have that flexibility. So that to them adds value.
When I was hired in 2012 to work remote, and I had the conversation, we're talking about pay, and I was asking how they determined it. They determined it based on where you lived at that time.
Really?
Luckily, I knew I was moving to San Diego, and I said, well, I'm about to move to San Diego, so can we base it off of that? Because at the time, I didn't have the strong opinion I have now. I didn't work remote. I didn't know. But the more I've learned, I just don't get that. You should be willing to pay somebody a certain amount. And granted, I understand you're talking to somebody, going back to Thomas's example of Louisiana, and you tell them 70 and they're ecstatic. Of course, I want to save the money as a business owner.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know that I don't think a company should tell them that you're paying them less because they live somewhere that has a low cost of living. It should be when in your negotiation, maybe the company knows that and they start lower, but I don't think you tell them. It just, to me, it makes me feel, why am I being paid less just because of where I live?
For the
Which
record,
is why I will be working out of Hawaii from now on.
For the record, I completely agree with you. As a matter of fact, our whole business model is based on the value of effort and not the X amount of dollars for X amount of heads. It's a value of effort. And I really believe in that. It's if I see this much value in X amount of effort, I don't care where you live, I'm willing to pay you. So I do agree with you from that perspective. I also think that somebody in Louisiana can use that for leverage. For example, if they were to reach out to a company that they know they typically pay $70 an hour for a developer, and they come to the conclusion, hey, I can do this for $50 an hour and still have a nice living based on where I live, I can, that income will have me sitting pretty. I definitely would not hold that against a consultant contractor going to a company and saying, hey, I know you pay this much. I know you're considering other candidates. If it helps, I'm willing to do it for this much less.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's all part of negotiations.
So with that said, then what are your feelings with offshoring, where you're paying these offshore companies, a fraction of what you would pay a U.S.-based person?
You're getting a fraction of the skill.
Well, not necessarily. There's plenty of good offshore places, but if you're going offshore, you're doing that already, and they are working for a super cut rate at that time.
Yeah, when I say skill, I mean quality. And you're usually with offshoring, I see people handing whole projects over and stepping away from the coding altogether.
So hold on. I'm not letting John off the hook that easy, because his argument's not standing up to me.
So it's standing up. It depends. So if you're bringing someone in to be part of your team,
mm-hmm.
That's one thing. To me, going off, if I'm offshoring, I'm not. They're subsidizing my team, but I see where you're going with this, and you're trying to catch me in craziness, and it's working. But screw you. I'm going. At that point, I'm making a conscious decision to find cut rate people.
Mm-hmm. See, I chalk it up to them making that determination, like them coming to me and saying, hey, we'll do this for $15, $20 an hour, and me saying, okay, I won't turn that down. But if somebody in Egypt was to respond to a job posting I had, I would treat them, I would treat them the same way I would treat anybody else as far as pay scale and all that goes. It's just hard to figure out where that line gets drawn.
Yeah, so. And then I get so concerned with that anyway. Like, I don't know how to deal with taxes or any of that dealing overseas, so I would avoid it myself altogether.
Well, we are technically international now, John.
I know we are.
We're mostly international. The podcast is mostly international.
No, I'm talking Diego Dev.
Yeah.
We have developers outside the U.S. borders.
Ooh. Say it quietly. Trump is always listening.
Yeah.
He's going to build a wall around that
See person. The little bead of sweat building up on John's forehead. Eric, you're talking
So, speaking of meetups, I went to another one tonight. It was
two in a row.
2 in a row. This one was interesting because I got to take Grayson to it. So I got to go pick him up from preschool, and then it was just me and him all afternoon, and took him down. We went and got a little ice cream and hot chocolate first before the meetup. So that made his
You had a little pregame?
Yeah, we did pregame. We did. I met David and his son there, and just hung out at Waypoint Public, which is a local brewery. It's not really a brewery, but
look me in the eye, John. Look me in the eyes. Was Spencer there?
At pregame? No.
Damn it! The peanut butters. Oh man.
So we went to a co-working facility, and Twilio was sponsoring a bots, tots, and lunch boxes. So it's basically you could bring your kid. They're targeting like 6 to 10 age range, but because they're just starting, they just wanted to get people there. So a bunch of us that have 3.5-year-olds showed up.
A bunch of adults showed up.
Basically. And they had makey makeys. Is that what it's called?
Oh, nice.
Makey. What is a makey
so,
makey?
I just happened to see it on a YouTube channel by Simone Gertz recently. I don't know if you've ever heard of her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Shitty Robots.
The queen of shitty robots, yes.
The queen of, yes. So she did it, and it's basically a little breadboard. You can connect leads up to different things, and it basically becomes a miniature keyboard. So it's hitting your arrow keys and a couple of others, and then you can hook up to different applications. I think these were running. Actually, I don't know what they were running because I didn't set it up. But anyway, one of them was being a piano, and what he did was took the leads and put them into a banana, and then you held the ground lead, and then as you tapped the different bananas, it played a different key on a piano. So just fun things like that.
There are Twitch streamers who specialize in getting insane high scores in video games on bananas and potatoes and things like that using makey makeys.
That's funny. So anyway, the meetup had things like that. They had another one that was playing cymbals and drums. They had a little robot that was on the ground that it would basically tell you a story, and you would make the robot move through the different squares, right? So you pre-program it to say, okay, go 2 squares this way, turn right 90 degrees, go 2 squares. That's a little more advanced. The kids weren't really getting that. They had different tablet things. They had little robots you could build that were like catapults and things. So really a fun environment for us all to be in. Really interesting. And I won one of the catapult things, so now I get to build that with Grayson. We'd actually started it, and we had a couple of pieces put together, and then they did the drawing, and I won one. I was like, perfect. I was just saying how I wanted one of these.
I want one of the Cosmo robots.
I don't know what that is.
They're adorable. I need friends.
They started a 3D print of a Lego character at the very beginning, and it took like almost 2 hours to print it out. And then all the kids were amazed that it was nothing, and now there's a Lego character there.
3D printing is the future.
Mm-hmm. Keep saying I want one, but
yeah, me too.
You really think it's still the future, though? I feel like it was the future, then it stopped being the future again.
No, they're making all sorts of stuff with 3D printing.
I saw some stuff today that I just thought that's so incredibly mundane, but it's so not, because it has no copyright holder or trademark holder or patent holder. It's somebody released a thing that holds the lid for a crock pot, so that you just pull the crock pot up and put the lid on it, and it sits there. And it's like, my wife uses a crock pot literally every day. I could print that thing out in 3 hours, and she would think I was the greatest person in the world.
Or you could buy it off Amazon for a quarter of what the stuff would cost you to print it out. And
kinda. I saw it on Amazon. It was $17 on Amazon.
Yeah.
Which, for a piece of plastic, is way too much.
Yeah.
I saw a guy designing his own
broken things where I've been like, man, if I had a 3D printer, I could probably print one of these up and not have to buy a whole new whatever to replace it.
Did you see, and I don't know if it was real or if it was a hoax, the cement 3D printer that would
that's real.
print a house?
Yeah, house printing is totally a real thing.
Yeah. I think that actually has I think that actually has more validity than home 3D printing, to be honest with you.
I don't think home 3D printing is going to be a big thing for 30 years, but the time will come in our lifetimes when home 3D printing is just like an inkjet printer.
No, it's going to have to be like an Echo device where you sit there and tell the device, "Hey, I need a 1-inch gasket," and it just prints it.
Oh, you're living in Star Trek days, huh?
Yeah, it's going to have to be like the Star Trek machine. That's when it'll get universal adoption. But
Is it crazy? Is it crazy to say that might be 30 years from now? That would be within our lifetime.
You say you want it, and like 6 hours later, you get it.
Right.
Where Star Trek is, I need this, and you have it right away.
Well, Star Trek is what, 300 years in the future.
I think that companies realize that and have started patenting a lot more of their smaller pieces that they never thought they would have to ever patent, just to help prevent this whole 3D printing wave.
There's been
read stories on this.
There's been a Ninth Court ruling similar to that kind of stuff. I'm not sure if you saw this. But on an appellate ruling from a case in 2012, the Ninth Court of Appeals stated that violating a website's terms of service is not criminal and cannot be treated as a crime.
Okay, I'm really curious about what that 2012 court case was, because if it has anything to do with the picture that's on the article.
So the picture on the article is the internet's own son. Boy, I can't remember his name, just his nickname. Aaron Schwartz, yeah.
Aaron Schwartz.
Aaron Schwartz. But it's actually related to a ruling of Oracle versus Rimini.
Yeah, I see that.
Where they were claiming that their terms of service violations were criminal and requesting legal action. But because this is an appellate court ruling, that's no longer the case. That it will be thrown out of hand if you try to say that violations of terms of service is part of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act.
Yeah, I was really hoping there would be some justice for Aaron Schwartz. If you're not familiar with that court case, look it up. It's heartbreaking.
There's a short documentary about him called "The Internet's Own Boy."
Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Put that card on there so it makes it into our show notes. You've got to watch that. It's heartbreaking. It's just a miscarriage of justice all around. It's frustrating. Not to say that he was not doing anything wrong on any level. There was some, questionable trespassing, but what they were trying to get him for was not that, and it's just a sad story. So make sure you watch that video. I'm a big fan of this.
If this show hasn't been enough of a downer, then make sure to polish it off with a nice documentary about suicide.
John pisses me off, and I just start spiraling downhill.
How'd I piss you off?
You pissed me off, man.
So earlier today, Thomas asked me if I was going to put some cards on Trello, so I put a bunch up there that were all stupid. But there's one, I have no clue what I was saying. Compainers.
Compainers.
Yeah, compainers, of course.
Yeah.
I have no clue what I was typing.
Speaking of compainers, I've been using Docker a lot lately. Eric, I know you're a Docker guy, right?
Complainers, maybe? Yes, I am. I've really, really started to embrace Docker.
Oh, you're right. It was complainers.
Was it really?
Yeah.
I thought Thomas had it right. I thought you were trying to say containers.
No, I was talking about Thomas complaining about me not putting cards on Trello.
Of course. Of course.
That's great.
So
Thank you
I
for
spun
figuring that out.
down. I spun down my Vagrant machines, and I am only using Docker now.
Nice. Very nice. How's that working out for you?
We're Laravel junkies, just
We
sort of
are.
out of necessity and habit. And there is a Docker container assistant out there called Laradoc.
Yeah, there is. That's kind of the old version, but very valid. Kind of everything in the kitchen sink implementation.
Yeah, so it's got all these Docker files. It has all these subdirectories for all the possible versions you could want to run.
Every web
Memcache,
server, every database store you could possibly think of, every caching store you could think of.
every
It's
version
got
of
everything.
PHP, HHVM still.
Yeah.
Beanstalk. It's really got everything.
It's typically what I will pull in when I'm trying to create a complex environment that I'm hoping to push to a production environment. Laradocs will kind of be like my template. But if you're looking for something to kind of simulate, and not to hijack your story, Thomas, but if you're looking for something to simulate Vagrant a little closer, or Valet even, have you checked out Vessel yet, Thomas?
No.
Oh, dude, check Vessel out. So Vessel is a composer install that you include into a project, and it's the whole Docker stack for you to run inside that project.
Ooh.
Yeah, you'll like that.
Are you creating one container with all your web database?
It creates separate containers, and Laradocs does as well. And again, Laradocs is really good if what you're trying to accomplish are customized configurations for your web server, and maybe it's talking to a Couch DB. But if you're looking for kind of your standard web server, database server, a Redis cache engine, Vessel is the way to go. Like, if you're not really worried about the services serving up the website, you're just trying to get some development done, include Vessel in a project, and it'll get up and go. It'll be out of your way, and life will be dandy. If you're trying to configure your site to run under certain configurations, you can still do that with Vessel if you wanted to, but I tend to lean towards Laradocs because it has kind of every web server, every database store, everything that you just need to kind of put the blocks together.
Now, John, do you know about Docker Compose?
Yes.
So I don't know if I'm just dumb for not knowing about this, but this is the thing that ties Docker containers together so they can all communicate as if they were a single machine.
It's also a way of building your container. So
it's fucking awesome.
Yeah. So I learned that from somebody that was hired at one of our clients, who actually got me out of Vagrant and into Docker as well, because he was able to figure all this stuff out.
And John will listen to him and never listen to anything I say. But yeah, okay, John, did I interrupt?
Did you hear something, John?
Not at all. So starting with a base PHP Docker container and then building everything we needed on top of that was really nice. So Ted in our chat brought up asking about running multiple apps on the same system, and are you using port mapping? And
right. So this is a common issue with Docker, because you have 4 sites, especially if you're using something like Vessel. You're running 4 web servers, each typically on a different port.
So
were you going to say something to this?
Why are you running 4 web servers?
Because something like Vessel gets pulled into each project, so that's just how that's how it runs. It's a complete stack.
So I have the issue now with this running the main project I work on in Docker. And then if I'm working on something else using Valet, for example, I shut down my Docker web container, start up Nginx. I'll work on that project for a bit, then have to shut down Nginx on my Mac and restart my container.
Right.
Now, see,
that's what I do as well, actually.
Laradox has a really simple way of handling this, though.
I have a solution. Oh, what's that? What's that, Thomas?
Laradox, when you use Docker Compose, you can name the network that they're on and assign the IP address. So if you're using Laradox, then you just open up the env file, change the IP address of that group for that site, and now you have two different Docker container blocks running with the same port mappings on different IP addresses mapped to different names. So in the instructions for Laradox, it tells you really simply how to do it.
And then you have to edit you edit your host file so that you're pointing your domain name to that IP?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want it to resolve, you would do that. I have been playing around with another solution as well, which was running a separate Docker container that acted as a proxy for all my other Docker containers. So I would have one Docker container that's just an Nginx proxy server, which would be exposed to my local host. So in the example Thomas is referring to, nothing gets exposed to localhost port 80. It all has these internal IP maps. The one I was playing around with doing was having a Nginx proxy server in front of all of it and having that exposed to localhost port 80 and having it every time I added a Docker, whether it was through Vessel, whether it was through Laradox, whether I just spun up a Docker separately, I would add it to the proxy and let the proxy explain to the proxy how to manage the domain. Now, I would still have to manually edit my host file. It's not like Valet. I've never looked into using that. What's it? DSQ mask or whatever it is Valet uses to
DNS mask.
Yeah, dynamically create that local DNS. That might also be a solution, but I still feel like the proxy would work.
Yep, I agree.
I think Laradox actually even has one. It might not be Nginx, but I think Laradox has a proxy that they use as well. Or it's one of the containers that you can spin up. It's been a while since I've looked at it.
I've definitely been loving using Docker instead of Vagrant. It's changed how I do a lot of things. So
yeah, and it's so less resource intensive than Vagrant is, and you're not losing 20 gigs of your hard drive to it. We need somebody needs to create tickets for those things.
Nah. They'll just get lost with time. You can have a ticket for everything.
Good.
Thomas, you also said you had a bunch of other stuff you were working on this week that you wanted to talk about.
I was very excited because you said you had a lot of PHP topics to talk about.
We can't hear you at all.
I was talking about Docker and the PHP meetup.
That's it.
I mean, I have something.
That was your massive
something
amount
else.
of
I have something else if you want to hear it.
Sure.
You made it sound like you were going to carry the whole show on all your stories.
Oh. Well, I got a great tweet from the Symphony Twitter account that was talking about a new feature in PHP 7.3 that I think is going to be kind of a big deal, even though it doesn't seem like it. They're adding a new method called HR time, which is to replace microtime.
Oh,
and
I heard about this.
It's going to fix some of the limitations and problems with microtime.
So I read about it too, and I still don't understand what the limitations are with it. Like, how is it any better than microtime?
So microtime, if you change the system clock, or if the system clock is updated by NTP or some kind of anything that happens to the timer on the system clock, then it will be off. And you would be surprised how often very, very, very small changes occur to your system clock when you're using an NTP server.
Mhm.
I wouldn't be surprised to say every hour your computer is fixing itself by a microsecond or two. With HR time, the value returned is absolute, not based on the system clock.
How's it
That
getting it?
makes sense.
How's it getting it?
Magic.
Yeah.
My guess would be that it checks the clock cycles of the CPU as it counts seconds. But I'm not sure specifically.
What
I'll tell you what.
Sorry, what I read was they were trying to mimic a lot of the parameters, and somebody pointed out, why would you have to pass in a Boolean to say you wanted a float value versus not? And they said, well, that's because that's how microtime does it, and they didn't want to have two different function calls. And then that same person, the next, the person that questioned them originally said, yeah, but it's still different because microtime is returning a string by default where you're not. So you're already changing the API from that perspective. So why not just break completely and not mimic microtime at all? There's no need to.
So there are some low-level kernel commands that you can access that request monotonic time from the kernel. And that is what's being used to establish the accurate time from this measure. And it brings PHP, one step closer to the enterprise everything. Perfect timekeeping is really essential for big applications. And it seems small, but I think it allows PHP to be used in places where previously people had said it doesn't keep time correctly or well enough. I like it.
Have a solution.
So
just turn off NTP date and you're good to go.
Well, there are other problems, though, that can arise.
Yeah, I'm sure. Eric, you're about to say something, and then he decided to drink instead.
No, I was going to say something.
Story of his life.
2 or 3 times. Hate my life. Hate my life.
Have a drink.
So speaking of, damn, I said so. I have to drink now.
Oh, now I have to refresh my beer. You go on.
Speaking of Symfony, I'm becoming more and more of a fan of Symfony, and I have become so addicted to Fabian's Medium blog posts. He's kind of the guy at Symfony. He's the developer, and he's been doing a lot of blog posts around Symfony 4, and where it's at, the next step, what it's doing, and man, I'm really starting to embrace it a little bit more. Each blog post that comes out, I'm like, all right, this is nice. They're coming up with these packages now where if you're trying to create an API, you just pull in Symfony API, and it'll basically build the framework for APIs. Or if you're doing websites, it'll pull in a lot of the common components, because by default it's pretty scaled back. Not as scaled back as I originally felt it was, but it is missing some kind of things that you would typically think would be there for default framework install, like a CLI interface, built-in web server, and things like that. But they're coming up with these packages now where it'll build out the framework a little bigger. I'm starting to. It's a lot like Laravel, or even Cake PHP in the day, where once you start to understand the mindset, the things that they're doing make so much more sense. And I'm starting to understand that the mindset in the Symfony kind of universe is, I guess it was very common to start to prune back the framework and remove components that weren't necessary to kind of make it more optimized and faster. And so they're kind of taking that approach where now you got to build the framework up a little bit, which is a little intimidating for newer developers or developers who are used to having everything in the framework when they first spin it up. But once you start to get your head around it and start to realize what packages you typically need and what packages you want, it's nice. It's getting nice. But my point being, Fabian's Medium blog posts on Symfony 4 have been fantastic. And I find myself, he's one of the people I've subscribed to on Medium, and I find myself waiting for him to put out a new blog post every week or so.
Yeah, everything he's been writing has been incredible on Medium within the last 6 or 7 months. It's just been
it's like where have you been this whole time? I'm sure if you're in the Symfony world, it's very common, but for whatever reason, he's never surfaced any of the channels that I follow. And now he has,
I think he started deciding to work on Symfony again. I think he was working on Symfony the corporation, and I think he decided to start working on Symfony the code base again.
Really?
And that's what brought him out of the sort of woodworks, is that because he clearly just showed up in my feeds. All of a sudden,
I'm the same way. Yeah,
publishing regularly, and I'm like, oh, where is this coming from? This guy knows everything.
Yeah,
and
I really want to see him talk. I want to go to a conference, or maybe he wants to come to San Diego for a conference. I don't know, but I really, really, really so badly want to see this guy talk.
Yeah, me too. And I feel like I've grown out of Laracasts and into his feeds, where Laracasts is practical implementations, and a lot of what he covers is architecture and best practice and logical reasoning behind practices.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Also, I was going to say the Symfony way of doing things was to write the documentation first and then teach PHP how to read documentation.
I went through one of his blog posts that included a tutorial on Symfony 4, and of course it pulled in Doctrine. And I've used Doctrine in the past, but I've always used it differently. I've never used it with the what's the commenting system? What do you call that? I'm blinking here. Help me out.
Documentation. All the routing that it does, and
but it's all in the comments. It's called something specifically. Help me out, John. Help me out.
I don't know. No, I know what you're talking about, but I don't know what it's called.
Using annotations.
Oh.
So the whole Doctrine database functionality model, it's all annotations. There's no code. It's all annotations. I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay, I see what you're saying it's going to do, but you don't have any PHP code here. How is it going to do any of this stuff?
So awful.
And it creates the database, it creates the tables, it creates the columns. It's a NIT, it's a varchar, it just does it all. Like there's no code anywhere.
To send flowers to your wife. It does everything.
It's witchcraft for you, I tell you. It's amazing. I'm like, wait a minute, that was pretty damn cool, man.
No, not cool at all. It's all it's all tech. It's all doc blocks.
I don't get it.
Stuff's not supposed to be used. That's not supposed to be used at all.
It's like, are you even a coder at that point? Are you just like a good documenter? And it was really cool because the tutorial he did. I was talking about the packages. He does one for APIs, and in a couple of steps, you have your API endpoints. You have the database stuff documented because you're using annotations, and then the APIs themselves are self-documenting. Where there's a site part of your site you can go to that will just kick out all the API documentation for you without adding any extra code. It's crazy. It's a crazy world. And I'm a big API guy. I love developing APIs. And I see that, and I'm like, oh, I can do that. I love coding.
It's hard to bring Doctrine into an existing application, though. I would love to use it on a greenfield, brand new application, but changing your application over to it is not easy. I've tried a couple times.
I have something new for you guys.
Be scared to. I feel like it's so fragile, but I guess maybe not. What is that, Thomas? I'm sorry.
I have something. So I'm running Jetbrains Toolbox. Are you guys using that at all?
I am. Yep.
What's Jetbrains Toolbox? What is that?
So it's a launcher for all of the Jetbrains products, but it also keeps everything up to date. It does updates on all of your installed software automatically, and it's Linux friendly. So if you've ever installed PHP Storm in Linux, you'll notice that there's some difficulties making sure each version is the right version you're launching and pinning it to the toolbar, et cetera, et cetera. Some just sort of basic annoyance behaviors.
John, I don't appreciate you using these things and not telling me about it. Wait a minute. Is this something you have to pay for?
No, it's free.
It's free. I did it based on Thomas's recommendation. You obviously don't listen to him.
That was a different episode. That was an episode where Eric wasn't here.
He listens to the episodes.
He does not. He does not.
I don't see
He hears them. He doesn't listen to them.
I don't listen to you when I'm in the same room as you. Are you kidding me? Wait,
you're like the buzzing of flies to Vigo.
So this is a companion for the Toolbox subscription, which is very appealing to me. But
if you just have PHP Storm, it also supports just that.
Yeah, no, I realize that, but I'm saying that's kind of why they came out with it. They're trying to appeal to the people who use a bunch of their products.
Yeah, and it'll track your projects for you. I mean, it's real handy. It's got some real cute stuff.
I still don't see how you download the damn thing. How do you get it? Everything I click on takes me to the okay, got it. That was not clear.
So I'm running the latest version of PHP Storm, 2017 3.3 EAP. And now I'm getting a totally bizarre warning from PHP Storm. And I don't know if you guys have seen this, but it's telling me to use a slash in front of all built-in methods to PHP. So instead of in array, they want me to use slash in array.
What?
That'd be annoying.
Instead of is set, they want me to use slash is set. And it's saying that this is an opcode optimization where PHP doesn't scrub the current working context for any functions with that name. It just uses the built-in method directly, and it cuts out a bunch of function calls.
So it's supposed to be a speed optimization by doing so?
Yes, and there is a GitHub repository that explains why you do this and the benchmarks for it showing a 68% difference on call user func and stuff like that. Huge differences in performance by namespacing the built-in functions of PHP.
I'd love to see a real-world benchmark on that, though, like on a actual application, not just.
But see, that's the best part about it, is that that's the easiest thing to do. Is you just go everywhere in your existing application and add it everywhere, and then benchmark it against the old version. It would be such an easy thing to do.
Well, you say that. Such an easy thing to do.
Such an easy thing. So I'm really fascinated by this. I want you guys to look into this and tell me what you've come up with, because I'm going to be looking into this. to try and improve
So
performance
I'm
on the
trying to
system.
find. I'm scanning our. I'm scanning our Slack right now, our company Slack, because I recently.
Well,
let's see, I think I found
while you're looking for that, I'm going to talk to Thomas. Have you seen the plugin for PHP Storm called PHP Inspections EA Extended?
I did see that. Friend of the show, Marcus, shared that with everyone.
Yeah, he shared it with us. I don't know if we talked about it on the show yet, but I've been
No.
using that and like that.
Yeah, so that it does all the sort of PHP MD type inspections, but right
Mhm.
there in the IDE with either Control Alt I or Shift Alt I or Control Alt I, depending on your OS, and gives you code style, control flow, error handling, language level, migration, performance, PHP doc, type compatibility, and other warnings.
Yeah, it's both good and bad. I mean, there's times where I open a pull request for a simple feature, but I found myself getting lost in that file. Like, oh, I got to change all my double quotes to single quotes, and I got to change. It makes it so easy to change or fix problems, even though they're not really problems, but they're optimizations. And then all of a sudden, my pull request is a mess and gets complained about.
Yeah, my mentor from literally 20 years ago had a term for that, which was masturbating over details. where you can basically infinitely spend time getting all of the details and perfecting it and wasting your time on it. But in reality, it works and it's good and doesn't need more time spent on it.
But there's a difference. If I were looking for it, all of the double quotes to change them to single quotes just to do so, I'm trying to micro optimize, which is stupid. But if the IDE will do it for me and all I have to do is hit Option Enter and it does it, why not do it? I'm not spending more than a couple of seconds and cleaning up a file.
I don't want the IDE to do it for me. I like using it because it gives me code quality goals to strive for.
No, I agree, and I'm not having
build positive habits.
Yeah, but I'm not. I agree, and I'm not having it like go and change an entire file. But for my key combination, it's F2 to find the next issue in the file.
Yeah,
and
if you could just say fix that line.
Yeah, and I do.
Nice.
F2 takes me to the next one. It's a double quote thing. Option Enter, it fixes it, and I just move on.
Okay, so
boom, boom,
I
boom.
need to get better at that then, because that's what I need to use.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of mass changes that I don't know are going to be made.
But your pull requests never get accepted anyways, so what's the deal with how complex they are?
That's true. All right, did you find what you were looking for in Slack, Eric?
I did. And it actually ties into this, what Thomas was saying, in a bunch of different ways. So when you do a commit in Slack, I said, so hold on one second, quick drink. When you do a commit in Slack, you have a bunch of options.
Huh? Commit in Slack?
I'm sorry. When you do a commit in PHP Storm, you have a bunch of options you can check, like check coding and check. I forget what all the checks are. I typically uncheck them all except for whatever the top two are. But I was working on a project, a greenfield project. As a matter of fact, if I'm remembering correctly, it was the Symfony code I was walking through the tutorial on. So I check everything because I want to see where I'm messing up, or maybe a lot of times you find out the framework that isn't PCR compliant or something like that. So I check everything to see what's what. And PHP Storm alerts me and says, hey, you're running a PHP application, you're using Composer, you really should install security advisories, which is from the same group that Thomas was just talking about with the function fully qualified name replacer, that ROVA. Is that how you say that?
I think it's just Rove creatively.
Is it Rove? Okay, I think that's how I've heard it said as well. And what Rove Security Advisory does is it looks at all your composer packages and sees if any of them has any security exploits on record. And I'm like, all right, that's pretty cool that Storm thought to do that.
You only had 2 tickets in Trello, and this was one of them.
What's the point? I don't get what you mean.
He spent like 5 minutes looking for it.
Haven't even gotten to the ticket yet, Thomas. But thanks for spoiling that one for me. Appreciate that. So I was thinking about how cool it was that PHP Storm caught that before I started to do the commit and told me, hey, you should look at that. No sooner does that happen that I get an email from GitHub on an older repo I had, a completely different repo, that is doing the exact same thing. And it was specifically because I committed my composer lock file, not my composer JSON. And it says, hey, we see you have this package in a composer lock file. This package has a security vulnerability. You should look at replacing it. And I'm like, wow, that is pretty cool too. So I just thought that was it's a very proactive approach to it. The issue with the GitHub warning was, and I didn't try the security advisory one, but the issue with the GitHub warning, and I'm not sure how to address it, is the package that it called out was a dependency of another package. And I was like, okay, I can't upgrade this directly because it's actually nested in other packages. So I wasn't sure how to fix that, but I still appreciated the fact that GitHub alerted me to it.
You would have to fork your dependency and then put a composer override on your repository to point to your fork for it.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
I've had to do that. It's a pain in the ass, but
yeah.
All right, guys, we're pushing.
And then you're stuck maintaining that fork, then, aren't you? Until maybe.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but hopefully, I mean, if you're able to fix the issue, open a pull request back, and hopefully they would accept it as a security issue, unless it's a completely dead project, in which case you might as well maintain
yours.
You just became the maintainer.
Yeah. There you go.
Thomas, were you wrapping the show?
I was wrapping.
Was that what
I was wrapping the conversational portion of the show where we talk about things you guys want to talk about, and breaking into my portion of the show where we talk about things that only I want to talk about.
Go for it.
It's the part of the show that wraps up the show. Hey, who knows Q? Who knows Q Sharp? Do you guys know Q Sharp?
I know Brent Sharp. He was a good guy. Brent Sharp.
Not the same thing.
No, different.
Microsoft. We talked about this about 2 months ago. Microsoft has actually released it now. They've got their quantum programming language up and running. You can go ahead and run their Hello World example. It's only 10 pages long.
I'll be jumping right on that bandwagon.
It is the nerdiest thing in the world. It says, the very last paragraph, now when we run, we get something pretty amazing. Init 0, 0 seconds, 499, 1 second, 501, agree 1000. Init 1, 0 seconds, 490, 1 second, 510, agree 1000.
There you go.
Pretty amazing. So it creates a bell state in a simulated quantum environment that you can run on your computer. A bell state is a relationship between two quantum particles, et cetera, et cetera. But real quantum computing applications coming up. And yeah, in 100 years, it's going to be really important to know this. But that's just a follow-up. I wanted to get to just the most awesome combination of doom and gloom and cryptocurrency talk that we've ever had. John, I know you've had your eyes on this.
I have not. I saw it on your list and I wanted to know what it was, but I didn't click on it because I wanted to hear your take.
Kodak at CES this year announced Kodak Coin.
I did hear this somewhere.
And not only did they announce Kodak Coin, but they released some sample hardware, a mining rig for mining Kodak Coin that is basically an off-the-shelf Bitcoin mining ASIC system with a Kodak sticker on the side that says Kodak Cash Miner with a K. And it even goes so far as to say it is a powerful Bitcoin miner at the bottom. So it doesn't even mine its own coin, it mines Bitcoin. So Kodak is breaking into the cryptocurrency. The day they announced this, their stock went up 120%.
And then
I
they
shit
cashed
you
out and
not.
they shut down.
They have announced literally nothing except that it will secure the digital rights to people's copyrighted content and that it will somewhat automate the process of litigating unlawful use of your content. But nothing in their press release, I read the whole thing, nothing has anything to do with the blockchain for any good reason. I mean, you can put an MP3 on the blockchain. That doesn't mean you should have. And they are not proposing anything interesting or unique except for a service where they sue people for you.
Wow.
And on that news, their stock went up 120%, which is just ridiculous.
You don't think professional photographers would see value in that?
Absolutely not.
Really?
It's the equivalent. No, it's the equivalent of buying the insurance that they sell you at Best Buy for the thing you just bought. Where if you know better, you know that they're making money on you, and that you should just go through the regular process of covering your own warranty, and that you'll probably never have to deal with it anyways. The service they're providing has nothing to do with photography or quality photography or anything like that. This is immediately going to be people registering their memes and then auto suing people for copying their memes. And then it's somehow tied to a cryptocurrency that they want you to buy a Kodak Cash Miner. Now, when I say buy, I mean rent, because they rent you the device that is used to mine, and you pay them in payments where they give you an estimated payout based off of a difficulty they control because it's a centralized coin. It is everything that you could do wrong with a cryptocurrency, they're doing wrong. And the moment that somebody tries to invest in it and then is told that it's the dumbest possible thing to invest in, then the whole thing will fall apart.
Have you guys noticed that we live in a world where a lot of people we interact with are similar of similar mindset as we are, which is basically early adopters and kind of futurists and taking pride in understanding where things are going. Have you guys experienced this bitter divide that's growing between the early adopters who haven't invested in Bitcoin and the ones that have, and the ones who haven't are basically starting to lash out, talking about this is the dumbest thing. Why is this? Why do we still talk about this? Why is this still a thing? Are you guys experiencing any of that?
I am, because, as you know, I'm developing Buscoin, the cryptocurrency for the content creator.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing so, I've gotten myself involved in a lot of cryptocurrency groups. And so many of them are people who are early adopters based off of what someone else is telling them to adopt early. They are poorly or completely uninformed early adopters. And that attitude and behavior has introduced absolutely clueless people into an environment that is full of academics and techies and nerds.
Mm-hmm.
So you go to these meetups and there's 5 graybeards and then 20 people whose farm is going under and they're trying to save it with Bitcoin. And the guys who know what they're doing look around and go, what the fuck is going on?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's these people who are being fleeced by people who won't show up to meetups because they know that they're the bad guy.
Mm. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's more of they missed a pretty big boat, and now they're hoping that boat is the Titanic because they're feeling bad that they're not on it.
I see that too. I mean, there's a lot of anger about video card prices right now because the gamer community wants to play their video games, but video card prices went up 80% in the last 3 days because of speculation on the cryptocurrency markets, and it's driving everyone nuts. I mean, there is definitely a get out of my pool, this is for me, not you mentality with a lot of stuff.
That's funny.
I do want to take a moment. I know we're running a little long here, and I do want to kind of circle back. If you guys listening, or if you people listening, I say guys in a very generic form, I've been called out on this several times now. I apologize. If our listeners listening know us, if you know us, you know that we're passionate about what we do. We're passionate about code. We're passionate about the community of our code, specifically PHP and the PHP community. John and I have decided to take up the effort of creating a local or creating a community conference. It's not necessarily local, but creating a community conference to fill a void here in Southern California where we didn't feel like there was a good PHP conference out here, and we wanted to kind of establish one. And that we finally saw that start to happen, and it's happening this year, where we've been discussing it for years, and we're working on Wave PHP. And I completely appreciate the hard work and effort involved with doing a conference, especially when it's not your full-time job. It's something that you're doing out of the goodness of, not the goodness of your heart, but out of just wanting. It's a karma thing. I mean, that there's no money
You're
to
a
be
great
made
person,
here.
and you want to know how to share it.
It's not even that I'm kind of an asshole. I'm not really that great of a person. John's a better person than I am. Many people will attest to that. But
just his really, Facebook is shaming. You've seen John's really, Facebook.
I stopped following him. I can only take so many pictures of cute kids, and then I start to get ill. So I have to stop following him.
No, it's disgusting.
He's got way too many cute kids on his stream. But it is important to us, and we've built a company around that passion, and we're working on a conference around that passion, and it's hard, and it's getting people interested in getting people to want to come to the conference just so you have enough to do the conference again is a scary thing. And Matt Trask reached out to me. He's another person,
friend of the show,
way bigger in the PHP community than I am. He's bigger in the PHP community than John and I put together are. And Matt is, he's working with a team in Nashville, Tennessee, and they're putting together a conference as well. They're putting together Southeast PHP. So ours is Wave PHP. It's here in San Diego. It's in September in Nashville, Tennessee, which might not be as appealing a place as San Diego. Grant you that. Don't worry about it, though. No, wait, what?
Not necessarily a destination city, sure, but a great place. I've been there. It's a wonderful place.
But I'm sure there's a couple people that are interested in Nashville. But in Nashville, Tennessee, Matt Trask is doing Southeast PHP, and his conference is in August. So it's almost a exact month before ours. This is August 16th and the 16th and 17th. Ours is the 19th through the 21st. Is that right,
yep.
John?
Yeah. Yep.
So ours is September 19th through the 21st. Matt's is August 16th through 17th, Southeast PHP in Nashville, Tennessee. If you can't make it out to California, or if for some reason Nashville sounds more appealing to you, I highly recommend that you check out southeastphp.com and
or if
see
you
what
want to
they
do
have to
both.
offer. Or have your company do both. Yes,
Yeah.
it's a good time to travel that time of year.
Hey, Eric.
Yeah.
Eric, what is late summer like in San Diego? I don't remember. It's been a year. It's awful, right? Is it like super?
Let's not even worry about late summer. Let's talk about like middle of the winter. Right now, I'm wearing shorts and flip flops. It's like 75. Here, hold on. Watch this. Okay, Google, what's the weather tomorrow?
It'll be sunny with a high of 77 and a low of 54.
Did you guys get that? High of 77, low of 54. That's
So
that's
what
the
you're
weather
saying
here. January 11th or January 12th. It's going to be a high of 77, low of 54 here in San Diego. So San Diego is pretty much the most awesome place you could live or visit any time of year.
So what you're saying
Especially
from
on the beach.
from what I hear here,
In Mission
If
Bay,
you-
it'll probably be in mid-70s.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect weather.
so if you go to one conference this year, go to Symphony Live in San Francisco. If you go to two conferences this year, go to Symphony Live and Wave PHP. Now, if you go to 3 conferences this year, you got to go.
How did Symphony Live get in here? Are we getting a cut of that?
Sure. Is it really in San Francisco? They do a bunch of Symphony Lives, right? Aren't
Yeah,
there,
you don't want to know what the date is for it though.
No. What is it? Tell me.
October 19th.
Oh. So you're in San Diego already. You've gone to Wave PHP. You've got a week or two to relax, hang out, and then you can go up to San Francisco. It's a little 8 hour drive up to San Francisco, and you can be there for Symphony Live. I'll go to
Beautiful
Symphony
city.
Live. I do like San Francisco. It's been a while since I've been up there, but I am a fan.
Am I helping? I'm trying to help. Am I helping?
I don't think any of I think Matt is going to block me on Twitter after he hears this. So
Pretty sure we're gonna get sued.
Fabian just posted on Twitter. I just released Silex 2.2.2, which is about a security issue. This guy is getting out there. He keeps popping up on my Twitter feed. He keeps popping up on my RS feed.
You see that check mark? Verified.
Is he verified?
Something none of us have.
How do you get? Oh yeah, he is verified. Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, my mother won't verify that I'm actually her son, so I can't expect Twitter to verify that I'm who I am either. It's a deep, dark personal issue that I cry myself to sleep on fairly regularly. But
all right, thanks for the doom and gloom on this episode, there, Eric.
I do think that's a good stopping point for the night. I'm about out of my wine.
I think probably about an hour ago would have been a good stopping point.
I love that John's running gag is that he doesn't want to be here.
John, you specifically asked if we could have this wrapped up in an hour and 30 minutes. You said, "Hey, you think we could have this done in an hour and 30 minutes?" And Thomas and I said, "Yeah, that shouldn't be a problem." And it's an hour and 33 minutes. What is your issue?
We're only slightly over.
Oh,
anyways, I'm Tom Rideout.
That is going to wrap up episode 91.
Oh, come on. You can't let me wrap it up.
Much. I'm Eric Van Johnson.
I'm John Congdon.
I'm Clive Owen.
Keep it ugly.
Keep it ugly.
Keep it ugly. Keep it ugly. Keep it drunk.
Okay, we got no more viewers. I'm stopping the broadcast.